Have you ever gone on a diet? You probably have at some point in your life because you wanted to get healthier, right? And most importantly, you wanted to look good. But have you ever detracted from that diet? Was there ever a time that you wanted to cheat on your diet so bad that you just gave into it? And not because of a lack of willpower, but because of the beliefs that you were telling yourself? Well, now you'll know what that kind of vocalization that you're hearing from yourself every single time that you detract from something or a commitment that you have for yourself or you plan for yourself. You're going to learn today what that specific thing is that is happening. And that is what we call cognitive dissonance. You've probably already heard cognitive dissonance. It's a big word. But do you actually know what it means? Let's first start off with the history of the cognitive dissonance theory. The cognitive dissonance theory was very basically conceptualized by a psychologist named Leon Festinger. And Leon, Mr. Leon, he basically collaborated with this person, with this woman named Merrill Carlsmith back in 1959. And what they did, what they did was very interesting. And this is what we call the peg turning experiment. Leon Festinger and Merrill Carlsmith both collaborated together in 1959, and they set out an experiment. And what did this experiment basically do? This experiment basically had three groups of people. The first group was a control group. Okay? These people from the first group didn't have any incentives. Okay? So the experiment was basically just having a bunch of groups doing mind-numbingly boring tasks for about an hour. Okay? And afterwards, they would turn pegs from wooden pegboards, from wooden boards. They would turn pegs, and afterwards, when they get out from the place of the experiment, there were two groups that were told that they would get paid in order for them to lie. Okay? There were two groups from those three total groups. The first group was a control group. These people basically did the experiment. They did boring tasks for an hour, and they turned pegs on a wooden board. And afterwards, they were told to lie about the experiment. They were told to lie about how interesting the experiment was, and they refused. They basically refused, okay? They didn't lie about anything. They told people who were coming next, the group that was incoming, that the experiment was basically boring. The second group, okay, they did the same thing. They did the boring tasks. They turned the pegs on the wooden board, and afterwards, they were told by the experimenters to lie to the next group, the third group that will come and do the same thing that they did. Okay? And the incentive was they would get paid $1, in order for them to lie. They would get paid $1 if they lied about the experiment. Okay? And what happened was, you say, they lied to the third group. And the third group, they basically believed this, okay? So the third group went in as well, went in and did the experiment as well. But this third group had an incentive of $20. They were getting paid $20 to lie to other people on how interesting the experiment was. And the third group did lie. Okay? So let's put a pin on the second group before we talk about cognitive dissonance, okay? The third group, they lied. They lied about the experiment. They lied how fascinating it is and how exciting it was, and they got paid $20. And there was no cognitive dissonance in there. Okay? They didn't think much of it because it was $20. The incentive was high enough for them to lie willingly. Okay? And now, let's go back to the second group. The second group, basically, okay, they didn't think that that them getting paid $1 was enough for them to lie to other people on the experiment, on how fascinating the experiment actually was. And interestingly, those people in the first group, they thought afterwards that it was actually exciting. They believed in themselves that that the things that the experiment was actually fun after all, even though it wasn't. See? So that's what happened in a peg turning experiment conducted by Leon Festinger and Merrill Carlsmith. And that's when the concept of cognitive dissonance was basically conceptualized, where it was basically founded on. Okay? So how it works is, we can see a diagram here. The cognitive dissonance resolution. There is action, there is a belief. If there is an inconsistency, between your action and your belief, you experience cognitive dissonance. So what is cognitive dissonance? It's basically the uncomfortable feeling that you feel, whenever your action doesn't match your belief, or whenever your belief doesn't match your action, and vice versa. Or if there's an inconsistency, okay? Your cognitive dissonance increases. That uncomfortable feeling that you get afterwards increases. And how does your subconscious automatically try to fix this cognitive dissonance? Okay? So your brain does a lot of shortcuts in order to reduce this cognitive dissonance, because cognitive dissonance is kind of like pain. It's kind of like a pain for your brain. So if you could see from the diagram here, whenever your dissonance increases, you either try to change your belief, try to change your action, or try to change your perception on your action. Okay, so let me try to give you an example. I'll try to extract the example that I made earlier in the beginning of this video. You said you wanted to go on a diet. Okay? You wanted to go on a diet because you thought that dieting is healthy. That is healthy and it makes you stronger physically and mentally. But you detracted from your diet. You went on a diet for a couple of days, and afterwards, it was just downhill from there. So that's when the inconsistency comes about. Okay? You subconsciously feel for yourself that you're not doing what you're supposed to do, that you're not doing or not acting in the pathway or whatever you believed in. You acted, okay, you cheated on your meals. Therefore, there's an inconsistency between your belief, okay, that dieting is important, and your action, wherein you're taking cheat meals, going above your caloric deficit, or your basically your diet, just your diet in general. And that makes you uncomfortable. So in order to make that uncomfortable feeling subside, you either try to change your belief about the diet. For example, you would say that dieting is really important and that life is short, so you should just eat whatever you want and try to enjoy whatever you want to eat. That's what happens when you try to change your belief. The second is when you try to change your action. Okay? You notice that there was an inconsistency between your belief that dieting is important for your health, and the action that you did, which was cheating on your diet. So you try to change your action. Okay? So how could you change your action in that situation? Well, you go back to your diet. That's how your brain subconsciously makes that dissonance, that cognitive dissonance subside. And the third and most common, probably most common, is changing your perception on your actions. You'd probably try to rationalize what you did. You'd probably try to justify that cheating on your meals isn't that bad. You'd probably say that it was just one meal. How could it be that bad? But that contradicts your belief. So there is still cognitive dissonance in there. But you've actively tried to reduce it. Okay? So how do you manage the cognitive dissonance? How do you handle this cognitive dissonance that you feel whenever your actions have an inconsistency or contradict your beliefs? Well, the first good step, and probably the most manageable step, is to notice that dissonance. You have to notice that uncomfortable feeling. You shouldn't try to ignore it. Okay? You shouldn't try to bottle it up. You should label that feeling. You should notice. You should try to notice, or maybe even journal about that feeling. Okay? So then you have more self-awareness. You have more awareness of what you're feeling as of the present moment. Is it cognitive dissonance? You should ask yourself questions and try to figure out what this dissonance is trying to tell you. The second step is, of course, just changing your actions in order to coincide with your beliefs, with your current beliefs. It sounds simple, okay? But it's actually pretty difficult. Depending on the magnitude of your situation. Okay? But that's still a good step forward in order for us to handle dissonance. Okay? That's basically it for cognitive dissonance. I hope that you learned something about it, the psychological phenomenon of cognitive dissonance. And I'll see you again in the next video. Thank you for watching.